Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Before we begin, please make sure to hit the subscribe button. There are times in life when the people we know best manage to surprise us, when a moment of laughter fades to silence, and someone we thought we understood reveals a truth that redefines everything. This is precisely what unfolded when Mark Consuelos, the charismatic actor, devoted husband, and morning show co-host we've all grown to love, sat down and delivered a heartfelt revelation that left his fans, and his wife Kelly Ripa, utterly speechless. Absolutely no one saw this coming. Not after decades of on-screen smiles, playful banter with Kelly, and the seemingly flawless image of a marriage that appeared unbreakable. But beneath that perfect exterior was a story few could have imagined, one filled with insecurity, fear, and a journey towards self-discovery. And when Mark finally spoke his truth, Kelly's reaction said more than any interview ever could. Stick around, because as this story unfolds, you are going to see a side of Mark Consuelos and Kelly Ripa that has rarely been witnessed. By the end, you might see love, and even yourself, in a whole new light. It all began subtly during a recent broadcast of Live with Kelly&Mark. The segment was meant to be casual, just another Tuesday morning with some laughs, witty conversation, and perhaps an anecdote about their kids. But on that day, Mark's tone changed. His entire demeanor shifted. The charming smile that typically carried him through every on-air moment vanished for an instant. He drew a breath, the kind of deep, heavy breath one takes before saying something held back for far too long. And then he said it. "I've spent most of my life trying to prove that I'm enough." The audience fell silent. Kelly glanced over at him, her eyes widening slightly in a look that seemed to ask, "Where is this coming from?" He went on, "You get to a point where success doesn't fill the void anymore. You smile for the cameras, but inside you're still searching." It wasn't scripted. It was not planned. For the first time, the usually unflappable Mark Consuelos lowered his defenses, and everyone in the studio and watching from home could feel the raw emotion in his voice. But what brought him to this breaking point? To understand that moment, we have to travel back, before Live with Kelly&Mark. Before Riverdale, before all the fame, Mark Consuelos was raised in a hard-working family. His parents, of Mexican and Italian heritage, instilled in him profound values of hard work, humility, and faith. He was not born into celebrity. He earned every bit of it. When he met Kelly Ripa on the set of All My Children in the 1990s, their connection was immediate and undeniable. They married young, eloping in Las Vegas in a love story that felt like it was pulled directly from the soap opera where they first met. And yet, even as their careers took off, Mark carried a silent burden within him, a persistent, whispering doubt. Every time Kelly's star climbed higher, as she hosted talk shows, wrote best-selling books, and became one of America's most cherished TV personalities, Mark found himself wondering, am I enough next to her? It was not jealousy, but something more delicate. The universal fear of wondering if your own best efforts are truly recognized, even by the person you love most. Fame brings adoration, but it also carries an invisible weight. Every morning they stepped out of their New York townhouse, aware that cameras could be waiting. Every smile had to be camera-ready, every move scrutinized. Mark once mentioned in an earlier interview that he often felt like a background player in someone else's film. But over time, that feeling became heavier. When Kelly was praised for her hosting, her charm, and her wit, Mark sometimes felt that the world saw him merely as Kelly Ripa's husband. And still, he loved her with all his heart. It's a paradox many couples can understand, loving someone completely while silently grappling with your own insecurities. He kept it hidden for years, until that morning when he simply couldn't any longer. As Mark spoke those vulnerable words on live television, Kelly did not interrupt. She didn't dismiss it with a smile or diffuse it with a joke. She just listened. The camera captured it all. Her gentle eyes, her lips pressed together, her hands folded in her lap. In that moment, her silence was more powerful than words. It was the silence of deep understanding of someone who had witnessed the struggle, but maybe never heard it put into words. When he was done, Kelly leaned toward him and said softly, "You've always been enough. You just didn't need the world to tell you." The studio erupted in applause, but for those who had followed their story, it was more than just a touching television moment. It was a marriage milestone, broadcast live for all to see. Later, in a behind-the-scenes segment, Mark explained why he chose to open up. "I didn't plan to say it," he confessed. "It just came out, but it felt like something I needed to voice, not just for myself, but perhaps for anyone else watching who feels the same." Kelly later shared with People magazine that they had engaged in many deep conversations, that those conversations, held in the quiet privacy of their home, away from the glare of studio lights, were the bedrock that allowed for such a raw public moment. She revealed that Mark's struggle wasn't new, but his decision to voice it was a breakthrough. For years, he had channeled his feelings into his work, taking on intense, brooding roles in shows like Riverdale, where he could explore darker, more complex characters. It was, in a way, his therapy, a place to put the feelings he couldn't articulate. But acting could only do so much. The core issue wasn't about professional success. It was about personal worth. Insiders close to the couple have suggested that the pressure reached a peak around the time Kelly released her best-selling memoir, Livewire: Long-Winded Short Stories. The book was a monumental success, earning critical acclaim and topping charts. Kelly was on a whirlwind tour, celebrated not just as a host, but as a brilliant author and humorist. Mark, always her biggest supporter, was there every step of the way, cheering her on from the front row. Yet, sources say that period was incredibly difficult for him. He was immensely proud, but with every standing ovation for Kelly, that quiet, insidious voice in his head grew louder. Online trolls and thoughtless headlines didn't help, often framing him as Mr. Kelly Ripa, a handsome accessory to her success. One particularly cruel article speculated on whether he was content living in her shadow. For a man raised with a powerful work ethic and a drive to provide and protect, this narrative was a slow-burning poison. It chipped away at his sense of identity, making him question the value of his own considerable achievements. It was during this time that Kelly truly showed the depth of her partnership. She saw the toll it was taking on him. She noticed the subtle shifts in his mood, the way he would sometimes withdraw after a major event. She didn't push or pry. Instead, she began to change her own narrative. In interviews, she would make it a point to steer the conversation toward Mark's career, his talent as an actor, and his crucial role as the anchor of their family. She frequently called him the Rock and spoke openly about how he was the one who kept their lives grounded amidst the chaos of fame. It was her way of fighting back against the public perception, of reminding the world, and perhaps Mark himself, of the man she fell in love with, a talented, driven, and profoundly good person who was so much more than just a famous woman's husband. Their decision for Mark to join her as the permanent co-host of Live after Ryan Seacrest's departure was a monumental step. For many, it seemed like a natural fit, but behind the scenes, it was a decision fraught with risk and vulnerability for Mark. It meant stepping directly into the world where his wife was the undisputed queen. It meant facing those insecurities head-on every single morning, live, in front of millions. Would people accept him? Would he be seen as an equal, or just the guy filling a seat next to his wife? According to friends, it was a leap of faith, one that Kelly encouraged, but never forced. She told him that his voice was needed, that his perspective was unique, and that their chemistry was something that couldn't be manufactured. She believed in him completely, and her faith became his strength. Taking that seat, next to her, was not an act of surrender to her world. It was an act of claiming his own place within it, on his own terms. The on-air confession was, in many ways, the culmination of that journey.